Hi, welcome to day 3 of the 12 Code Challenge. Today's title is Complete. We are going to bring this part of your story, this chunk of your story from the last 10 years that you've lived out and the way it's played out into completion. So before we dive in, I want to talk a little bit more about some things that may have come up that need to be released, like what we talked about on day 1. So as you created your reverse bucket list in day 2, reflect, you may have found yourself journeying into, I think, what's somewhat of a natural thing to journey into, where you think of all the shoulds. You think of all the things that you should have done. Maybe some regrets came up, all the things that you wished you would have done. And as those things come up, we're going to take the first part of today's exercise to address them. Because what we don't realize is a lot of times the word should, when you are using the word should in terms of yourself, you are measuring yourself up against something that's outside of you. So it's usually something that we think is expected of us. We think, oh, it's expected that I show up in this way, or it's expected that I do this, or I saw this on Instagram or social media, this person that's living their life like this, that's what I should be doing. And rather than getting caught up in that, let's see it for what it is. Let's see those should have dones or those I wish I would have dones as things that we tend to measure ourselves with. So the first part of today's exercise is to go through and write out your should have done list. So now that you've gone through your reverse bucket list, you have all the key points of each of the years throughout the last 10 years of your life, and you have approached those with the gratitude and the celebration. We don't want to just leave any of those should have dones by themselves, just floating out there. It's time to acknowledge them, bring them on paper, and release them, because we don't need to be measuring ourselves up against something that didn't happen, that we thought maybe should have happened, or that, ways that we should have approached our life, or things we should have accomplished. No, we need to honor our life for what did happen, what we did accomplish, what we did learn, the challenges we did go through, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the ugly, the light and the dark. And we honor those and do it in a way with love. The should have dones and the wish I would have dones, those are all just, we're keeping ourselves in the past. And I think we do this, my nose is itching, which means this is a good topic, right? That's what that means, right? When I think that we go there because we are afraid of completion. Completion, we have all wrong, I think. At times we fear completion because of all the things we think we should have done, or all the ways we think we should have showed up, or all the things, that we didn't accomplish. And we start measuring ourselves against that. And it just keeps us treading the water in something that is ready to be completed, something that's ready to come to that point in its development and fruition, and allowed to move past completion into the next part of its life, of your life, and all of the above in between. So in that fear of completing something or coming into a completion, we tend to think it's the end. This is the end. And we have this fear around endings. We think, well, we see an end approaching and we look back and we think, but I didn't do all of this, and I didn't do this, and I didn't do this, and I wanted to do this, and this should be a part of the story, and that should be a part of the story. And we fear bringing this part into a completed round, a completed part of our story. I'm going to use an example When I was writing my book, I so feared completing it. And it was the weirdest thing. Like, that sounds so crazy. But when you're writing a book and you're starting, like, doing your first book, doing your first big project, bringing this dream to life, and it starts nearing the completion of the book, you think, wait, hold on, let me go back. I need to go back and edit. And maybe I shouldn't put this in there. Oh, and maybe I should have put this part in there. And, you start going through all the shoulds, all the should have dones and the would have dones and the wish I would have dones in the writing of the book. And I'm going to tell you, I stayed there for way too long. I went back and kept editing and took chapters out and added chapters in, and I realized that I was so afraid of completing it because I thought it was the end of this dream, that it was like, okay, well, now what? It's done. Now what do I do? And so I think my mind took that and was like, okay, there's so much more you want to say. There's so much more you want to tell. There's so much more. And I had to train myself, well, hold on a second. The book is not the only way to say, to share these things and share these messages. There's going to be videos, there's going to be trainings, there's going to be all these different things that will come from this book. I had to train myself into that. And I also had to say, like, well, this won't be my only book. Maybe I'll write more books. Maybe all this stuff that I think needs to be in there in this first book is actually a new one. So I use that to just illustrate. I think a lot of times when there are parts of our lives where it is ready, they're ready to be completed. They're ready to come into, okay, this part of your experience is done. It's time to move it into the next level, into the next part of its cycle. We get afraid because we think it's an end. We think that that's it. No more. You're done. What's to come next? Who knows? And we get into fear, and that puts us back into the past, and we think, okay, I should have done this, I should have done that. And when we stay there, when we stay in the past, that's when depression comes up. That's when we get sad and down on ourselves, and we start judging. We put ourselves into judgment because we're thinking of all the things we should have done rather than celebrating all the things we've done and bringing ourselves into the completed part of the story so that we can start the next part of our story. A completion is merely just a part in your story. It's a graduation. We all graduate, like we graduate something. High school, you graduate high school, you've completed high school. It's not that you are like, yeah, you're probably never gonna go back to high school, sure, but it's not the end of your story. You're just going into the next part of your story and taking the part leading up to that moment into the next part. So completion allows you to go into the next part of your story. Rather than treading the waters, trying to push yourself back from completing this decade, this last 10 years, let's allow yourself to take it with you, bring it to completion so you can take it with you in a nice little way. You can carry it along with you into the next part of your story. That's what today's about, is completion. So we're going to address the fears. We're going to address the fears that are coming up. And the fears mask themselves with shoulds. What you should have done, what you wish you would have done. So any of those things that came up as you were going through your reverse bucket list, if anything came up, now you get to take the first page of this workbook and write them down. What do you wish you would have done? What are the shoulds? What do you think you should have done over the last 10 years? What do you think you should have done? Once you write that down, really look at it. Why? Why do you think you should have done those things? Is it something that you yourself really completely want to do, like in your heart and your soul want to do? Maybe it's not the time yet for some of those things. If they didn't happen, maybe it's not the time yet. Maybe the last 10 years were preparing you for those things that you really, really want to do. And maybe some of them are you legitimately think that it's something that you should have done to belong, or something you should have done because that's what you should have done by this age that you're at, or that's how you should have shown up in this capacity because that's what it looks like how everybody else does it, or that's our kind of perception of that. And that's okay. It's okay to think that, but see that for what it is. when you think that you should have done something because somebody else is doing it that way, or that's an expectation or your perception of an expectation, those are things where you are just measuring yourself. It's another way that you're treading that water because you're afraid to complete this part of your story and walk into the next part. So first, write down the should have dones, wish you would have dones, and then next to each one, you're going to write down what the truth is behind that. What is it why is that there? Just why is it there? Is it because of an expectation? Is it because it's a judgment? It's something that you think someone else is doing and you should have done it too? Or is it legitimately something you want to do, but maybe it just wasn't the time, and maybe you're not allowing yourself to see, it maybe wasn't the time for that yet. Maybe I had to complete this. I have to complete this part of my story in order for me to move into that thing I really, really want to do. So that is the assignment. That's the first part of the assignment. So this is going to help you come into that completion. We got to address everything. We're not just going to address all the fluffy, fun things, okay? We need to go into the things that are floating there, that we allow to float there and unaddressed. We need to address them and allow them to be released. So we're kind of bringing in both day 1 and day 2 into this exercise to really wrap them up and bring them to completion. So that is the first part of today's exercise. The second part is looking at your reflect part of your story. You have created a storyline. Believe it or not, you have your storyline here in your bullet points from your reverse bucket list. So the second part of this exercise is to create an overall summary of the story of the 10 years that just are completing right now. So this last decade we just lived out from 2019 back to 2009. You're going to summarize it based on these things. So what did it bring to you? What gifts were in the last 10 years we just lived for you? What's the overall theme? That's a really fun one to put on it too. What is the overall theme? If you were to give the last 10 years you just lived out a name, one word, what would it be? So these are some of the things that you're going to get into in part 2 of this exercise. So you have a couple worksheets that are below. Click the link in the bio. Click the link in the email below and download those. Tackle part 1 and then tackle part 2. And the challenge is for day 3 is to get on and share your summary. So you get to tell your story. Bring it into full completion. This is the story of the 10 years I just lived. From 2009 to 2019, this is the overall summary of my story. Think of it like you're going to pitch a movie, right? You just played out the movie, you just shot the whole thing and wrapped it, it's all done. And you are about to share with your potential audience, guess what? Here's what my movie's about. Here's what this part of my story was about. So just real short, simple. You can get on and do it video, like shoot a video and share it. You can do it on your stories. You can do just a post and kind of write it out, whatever you want to do, but that is the challenge. So I hope you accept that part, because when we share it and bring it into a verbal form, it brings that completion to be. So writing it down is one thing, but sharing it brings energy to it. It brings energy to it, and it allows people to celebrate with you this part of your story and this part of completing this section of your story. So that's today. I'm super excited to hear all about it. So we will talk soon and see you tomorrow. Okay, bye-bye.